Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're looking at a period that completely rewrote the American landscape, the Gilded engine of industrial transformation. I mean, think about it. In just a few short decades following the Civil War, the United States morphed practically overnight from a quiet, agricultural nation into a roaring global industrial powerhouse. It's an absolutely fascinating story of unprecedented growth. But as you'll see, that rapid expansion came with some very intense, very real human consequences.
Okay, let's dive into this. Here is our roadmap for the action and reaction journey we're about to take. We're going to start with Section 1, the spark of industry, and then move right into Section 2, the rise of big business. Following that, we'll hit Section 3, life for American workers, and Section 4, cities and changing society. And then we'll bring it all home with Section 5, the industrial legacy.
To anchor ourselves before we really get going, let's just look at how incredibly fast this all happened. Right after the Civil War, we're still looking at a nation of farmers, right? But by the 1870s and 1880s, boom, we see an absolute explosion of big business growth. Now, this kind of hyper-expansion doesn't happen without some friction, which directly triggered the massive labor movements in the 1890s. And that pushback naturally cascaded right into the societal reforms of the early 1900s. It's kind of like a perfect domino effect of economics and human experience.
So, Section 1, the spark of industry. What specific building blocks actually ignited this massive transformation?
Well, you don't just wake up one day as a global industrial powerhouse. You need the perfect recipe. First off, you need incredible, abundant natural resources. We're talking coal, iron, and oil just sitting there waiting to be extracted. Next, you have to actually move those materials, which is where a massively expanding railroad network comes in. Suddenly, you're connecting raw materials to factories and factories to markets coast to coast. Add a wave of rapid technological innovation on top of that, and then the final, absolutely crucial piece, a massive workforce. This was driven simultaneously by domestic migration, people moving off the farms, and a huge, unprecedented wave of European immigration. When you get resources, connectivity, tech, and millions of workers colliding all at once, that is the ultimate catalyst for a boom.
Which naturally brings us to Section 2, the rise of big business.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how this sheer abundance of resources naturally paved the way for massive, unprecedented monopolies. We're talking about concentrating unimaginable economic power into the hands of just a few individuals. Take Andrew Carnegie, for example. He didn't just participate in the steel industry, he totally dominated it. Through massive scale and ruthless new efficiencies, he built a steel empire larger than literally anything the country had ever seen.
And right alongside him, you've got figures like John D. Rockefeller in the oil industry. Together with other big tycoons and railroads and banking, these industrialists achieved their immense scale by aggressively increasing efficiency and systematically eliminating fair competition. The staggering wealth they accumulated completely changed the power dynamics of the entire country in the span of just a single generation. It's wild to think about. But, history is all about perspective. Looking back, historians document two very distinct ways these individuals were viewed. To their supporters, they were the captains of industry, highly praised for their genius in creating massive scale, driving efficiency, and quite literally building the economic foundation of the nation. But to their critics, they were heavily condemned as robber barons. They were viewed as men who built their empires through highly exploitative business practices, largely at the expense of their workers, all while crushing any and all competition. So it's two completely different lenses looking at the exact same people. And that brings us to the human side of the equation. Section 3, life for American workers. Let's move to and see how this builds, because while the industrialists were reaching dizzying heights, the reality down on the factory floor was vastly different. Yes, this rapid industrial growth successfully created millions of brand new jobs, but those jobs came with some really harsh terms. Workers faced gruelingly long hours for incredibly low pay, and perhaps worst of all was the daily reality of deeply unsafe working environments. Keep in mind, this massive economic boom was happening entirely before modern safety regulations or any significant labor protections even existed. You were pretty much on your own.
So those incredibly difficult conditions became the direct catalyst for the American labor movement. Workers quickly realized that as individuals, they had absolutely zero leverage against these massive corporate monopolies, right? So they formed labor unions. These were organized groups of workers coming together to collectively advocate for just the absolute basics: better wages, safer conditions, and reasonable working hours. Naturally, when you have a newly organized workforce demanding baseline protections from an industry aggressively focused on peak efficiency and maximum profit, well, you get a clash. This period was marked by intensely rising tensions. Fundamental disagreements over working conditions led to major, historic labor disputes and widespread strikes. It was essentially the volatile growing pains of a rapidly expanding economy coming face to face with the actual human beings powering it.
Section 4, cities and changing society.
See, this industrial explosion didn't just change how people worked, it completely geographically reshaped the country and where people lived.
As factories multiplied, major urban centers like Chicago, New York, and Pittsburgh saw their populations explode almost overnight. Millions of Americans left rural areas, and millions of newly arrived immigrants poured off ships, all converging on these specific cities in a desperate search for factory work. These places rapidly transformed into massive, dense industrial hubs.
And this brilliantly illustrates the double-edged sword of the era. On one hand, rapid urban growth meant vibrant new communities were being built, and millions were finding the work they so desperately sought. But on the other hand, this sudden influx caused immense urban strain. Housing became intensely crowded. We're talking whole families crammed into tiny tenement rooms, and basic city infrastructure was just completely overwhelmed. The cities simply couldn't keep up, creating a massive strain that would inevitably force the major social and political reform movements of the early 1900s.
Let's start bringing this all together in Section 5, the industrial legacy.
If we zoom out to look at the long-term impact of this cascading chain of events, history pretty much agrees on one fundamental thing. As the quote says, this era built the economic foundation for the modern United States, while also creating significant challenges for workers and cities. So, the crucial point is that America's rise to global power was undeniably remarkable, but it came with a very heavy human cost. The tensions born in these factories and crowded city streets established a dynamic that would go on to dominate the entire 20th century.
Which leaves us with a really important question to chew on. How did the tensions between rapid industrial growth and workers' rights during the Gilded Age still shape America today? It's that constant balancing act between corporate ambition and human welfare, and it's something we are still actively debating right now. And speaking of the ultimate price of unchecked ambition and scale, that directly sets the stage for our next explainer. Join us next time as we explore the ultimate symbol of Gilded Age engineering, massive scale, and tragic hubris, the story of the Titanic. See you then.